Here's my definition of a fragile male. You and your girlfriend get into a farting contest. Your girlfriend lets out a nice loud juicy fart. You're trying not to laugh, but at the same time you're like, you don't want to let your girlfriend beat you in a farting contest. Your fragile male ego just can't handle your girlfriend beating you in a farting contest. You fart as hard as you can, and you end up just shitting your pants in front of your girlfriend clowning yourself, dude.
He's so relatable.
앞머리 안 자를 거예요.
What, you don't think that's the kind of thing that happens a lot? That doesn't seem like a plausible story? I don't know, it's episode 153. Last week, we talked about Pestilence. We mentioned a guy named Martin Van Drunen. He's famous for doing this. Everybody loves that, right? Well, he's only on the first two Pestilence albums, and then later on, he ended up hooking up with a band named Asphyx. And besides Pestilence, that's probably the thing he's most famous for. So this week, we're going to be talking about Asphyx. But I noticed when I was cutting out samples, apparently I like this band a whole bunch because I got like 12 minutes of music or something, and that'll make the episode really long. So to keep me from going off topic, I have installed this alarm. Co-host is going to hit that whenever shit starts getting too wacky. So anyways, Asphyx, I've been listening to them a long-ass time because I saw them on some website I can't remember the name of. They had this list. I think it was like top 8 death metal albums or something right when I was getting into death metal. And everything was like all that weird kind of like triggered super technical shit. Like I liked Nile and Obituary and stuff, and I didn't really like any other death metal. I like the idea of death metal. I'm like, I'm going to read this. Maybe there's some good death metal in this. And on that list, there was Atrocity's Todesen Sucked, which is a great album. There was Intestine Balism's Anatomy of the Beast, which is another great album. There was Gorefest's False, which is an amazing album. And there was Asphyx. And I figured I like those other 3 albums off of this list. I'll probably enjoy this Asphyx album. I didn't at first, but I felt like there was something there. I kept listening to it. And that was probably the first time I had to really try to like an album because it sort of expanded my mind as to what death metal could do. And I'm glad I did because it's one of my favorite albums now, that first Asphyx album. They introduced it as Martin Van Drunen's post-Pestilence project.
Isn't that cute? But it's wrong!
Referring to it as simply Martin Van Drunen's post-Pestilence project is a gross oversimplification because they existed since 1987. If you remember, Pestilence put out albums in 1988 and 1989 with Martin Van Drunen on it, and he didn't join Asphyx until the 90s for their first album. But there is another album that didn't get released until 1996 that features songs that would go on to be on the first 3 Asphyx albums, entitled Embrace the Death, that has the original vocalist Theo Lumens. At this point in the band, kind of the main dudes doing everything are the drummer Bob Bagkus and Eric Daniels, the guitarist, and then Theo Lumens, who also helped out with songwriting. I'm gonna play you a song off of that first kind of demo-ish album thing. It's weird. Like if they never did anything else, this would be kind of like their only album, but it's also a demo, sort of like Dr. Shrinker from Wisconsin. But I'm going to play you a song, the one song on this entire Embrace the Death album, which depending on your version of the album also includes the Mutilating Process EP. But the one song from these sessions that was never re-recorded or repurposed into newer songs when they kind of got signed and started doing actual full lengths. The name of that song is Vault of the Wailing Souls. Okay, it starts out, this is pretty revolutionary for the late 80s. A lot of people accuse, I guess, Asphyx of being a doom death band because they have these very, very ponderous slow parts. I disagree. I would say that they are a mid-pace kind of bolt thrower-ish death metal band, without ripping off Bolt Thrower, of course, because they're around at the same time, that suspends these islands of doom within mid-pace to fast parts like this. Their songs have a lot of different movements to them. This is some really good kind of thrashy shit here. And then it goes into, this is the mid-paced bit here. So this song is great because it shows off the different kinds of things that they have in their bag of tricks as far as being a band. Mid-paced parts, thrash parts, and doomy is doom fuck parts. That's not a good sentence, but you get what I'm saying. That's some doomy stuff. Very, very depressing, dark, all kinds of shit. Not a lot of vocals on this demo, especially compared to the Van Drunen shit that would come on later, where he puts in all kinds of lyrics and whatnot. But that song's interesting because it shows kind of a bridge between their influences and what they would become. As far as their influences go, Teutonic thrash and a lot of it. This is Sodom, And you could see how this sort of mid-paced, kind of atmospheric take on the genre from the third Sodom album might have influenced Asphyx. You can see a lot of the guys in Asphyx shouting out bands like this and Death Row, just all of the kind of more mid-paced atmospheric moments in German thrash metal influenced Sodom. I mean, not Sodom, that was Sodom. Influenced Asphyx a whole lot. But the thing about those riffs right there is they are slaved to the vocals, like so. It's heavy, but it's still working within kind of a pop rock framework. You see how these riffs are sort of structured around the vocal cadence that Mr. Tom Angel Ripper is spitting into your eardrums. You get what I'm saying here, man? That shit is still kind of like old school heavy metal at its core. Asphyx takes the idea of having those sort of mid-paced atmospheric riffs and detaches them from your standard kind of like punk influenced vocal cadence in favor of being a lot heavier and a lot more complex. In fact, if you were going to insinuate that the best of modern death metal is sort of like a rebirth of European classical music, I think Asphyx would be the band to do it with. In fact, that's why I have the alarm installed, is because I need to use longer samples from these songs. Funnily enough, on that same list I found them with, there was Intestine Balism, a band I had a similar problem with, who also had like the very long involved songs. Or rather, in the case of both bands, the songs themselves aren't terribly long, but they have very long kind of build-ups and layerings. Yeah, you're right. There's like an 18-minute long episode on Intestine Balism. It's called episode 92 of RFI. If you want to learn more about those guys, go there. But Asphyx, here is an example of a song from the Embrace the Death demo album thing that shows them pretty much leaving kind of that 80s metal thing entirely behind, as opposed to only kind of halfway behind with that more thrashy Vault of the Wailing Souls song. The name of this one is The Sickening Dwell. Stereo panning effect, go! There it goes. Okay, this is why I don't call them a doom death band, because they've got a bit too much of this right here. This is pretty fast, or at least mid-paced. Like I said, somewhat comparable to Bolt Thrower, but they're a lot more malevolent sounding, a little bit less Fortune and Glory, a little bit more just rot and decay. These are the islands of doom I were talking about. Just like bits of doom floating in a sea of like more mid-paced death metal. Very cool stuff. Letting a lot of notes just like ring out and then just hitting into them really hard. This riff right here is cool. It's very punkish. They ended up covering Master way later into their career, and it makes sense because you can hear a lot of Master influence on this kind of riff. And then it goes into one of the greatest riffs of all time. I love this. You can see them bringing back kind of the same sort of progression from that doom part earlier, where they made it into this like mid-paced doom metal thing, and then here we go with the transition right here. This is why these song samples are so long, because these songs flow so effortlessly in all their different kind of facets. And if you just pull one part out, it sort of like lessens the impact of how well written this is. That's what I mean when I say Asphyx takes a while to get into, because there's just so much stuff going on, like this spooky lead guitar thing here. And then the way they come out of it with this like tremolo picks, like sheets of chords, but then like the other guitar layer is doing the you know, like kind of more percussive notes. Really cool, kind of like deeply layered stuff, almost somewhat black metal in how they do that. In fact, if you look at old interviews with like Euronymous and stuff, he actually liked Asphyx a lot. He noted it as one of the only death metal bands that were putting out modern stuff that he could stand back in the early 90s. But as I mentioned earlier, all of these songs from this album were later on re-recorded, repurposed, slightly rewritten for their first three actual album. The name of their first album is The Rack. No, not like that, like a torture rack. But anyways, what's cool with this official debut album, not only is it one of my favorite albums of all time, but if you have Embrace the Death and The Rack, you can kind of compare how their songs evolved. Sort of like an Abominations of Desolation versus Altar of Madness thing. That guitar tone is maybe the best guitar tone. It's very unique, super buzzy, and kind of cheese gratery. The song itself isn't that much changed from the demo version yet, except the fast parts are quite a bit faster, and you'll notice when the slow part hits right about now, These slow parts are also substantially slower, and the drumming has gotten a lot more like kind of ambient, weird orchestral during the slow parts, which I think is pretty cool. But also, we got Martin Van Drunen on vocals right there, and his vocals are the best. He's pretty much unquestionably my favorite death metal vocalist. Sorry, transition didn't work quite as well there. I've been cutting up these songs to make them shorter. But you see there's way more lyrics, and the lyrics are very different. Same riff here is amazing. But the lyrics under Theo Lumens were very occult and kind of mysterious and weird spiritual. The lyrics under Martin Van Drunen are very verbose and interesting. They use a lot of antiquated language, and they go through weird, just kind of like gross and gory situations, but in a very dark and sophisticated way, which fits pretty well with the music here. Also, the leads are a lot stranger. Before it was standard whammy bar stuff, now it's all layered and strange in this version of the song. And that new guitar tone really helps out the tremolo parts to just be this like weird buzzing wall of nastiness. There are new songs on this album, such as the opener, Vermin, which is a great way to start the album off because it shows their songwriting style in a more succinct format. Most of the song is carried by this nasty kind of fast riff here. Good fast riff. Great lyrics. Red Eye's lyric is nasty. But yeah, that riff. The interesting thing about that is we got this like, it's a fast song. Fast death metal opener song of the album right there. Fuck. But it has 3 different breaks. So it's not just like, build up verse, chorus, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thrash break. Fuck you. The song's over. Solos, I guess. No. This song is one super anthemic fast riff. And then within the soup of this riff created by that chainsawing guitar, you insert 3 different thrash breaks, or not even really thrash breaks, they're just kind of Asphyx breaks. Nobody really does these kind of breaks. Here's the first one. Here's some more of that fast riff to give you context as to how they're going to transition into that mid-paced riff. Also, you get more dank lyrics from the guy. Hopefully you can understand him. I sure can. Right? Here's the first one. It's still a pretty fast kind of groove break. Not that separate from the main riff of the song. In fact, the melody encased within it is a variant of that main fast riff. Then we get towards the middle of the song after going through that fast part again, and here we go. We're getting into the break right here. Now it is definitely more mid-paced, nowhere near as fast as that first break, and it's a much harder counterpoint to that main riff than the first break was. Let's check out the bass trick here. Double bass rolling in with the riff there, increasing the tension. Very cool stuff. Then the third break is even wackier because it goes into a different fast riff first, which shows an interesting technique. Tremolo, 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 tremolo pick here, and then it's going to hit single notes. Vintage Eric Daniels guitar trick for making some very tense compositions, and I enjoy it quite a bit. And then we go into the last break, another kind of more thrashy one, but not really bouncy thrash. This is just more kind of grinding and gross, and I love it. Also check out this fucking vocal part here. Pretty dang. Nice use of pitch shifter, my man. Dig that quite a bit. But yeah, that's the song Vermin. And it manages to cram all of these different sections into like a 4-minute long song. That's what separates these guys from like kind of your more standard sort of doom death band. Like there was a doom death band running around in the Netherlands that put out an album before Asphyx. Their name was Sempiternal Death Rain. The title of the album was The Spooky Gloom. That's a great album, and it does kind of a similar thing where there's like thrashy bits and then mostly doomy stuff, but their songs are like 8 minutes long, and they're nowhere near as well thought out as these like really compact like just punches from Asphyx, which is why I think Asphyx is still going around today. But so that's what like their newer songs in this album sound like. Even the older ones, even if they don't change them that much from how they were in the demos, just their genius ear for like arrangement and even like where the songs are placed on the album makes them seem really fresh and new. For example, this song is an instrumental. It used to be called Mutilating Process. Now it's called Ode to a Nameless Grave on the full length. And it shows off sort of like an Italian horror movie soundtrack influence and a bit of classical music influence. With these like doomy intro parts here, and then watch this transition. Great use of silence and stereo panning to build expectation for whatever nasty stuff is going to happen. Also, the interesting thing there was that scale kind of kept moving up each time they played it. Just interesting little guitars calling to each other across the morass of music type thing. It's great use of like just like weird stereophonic composition, all kinds of good stuff. And then we are into sort of like the main kind of like doomy bit of the song, which has a powerful groove to it. But they are also going to layer some very haunting lead guitar over it. This actually reminds me a bit of the Entomb song Left Hand Path's ending, that melodic part there, which, spoiler alert, Entomb didn't actually write. They were covering the soundtrack to the horror movie Phantasm. Go look it up. This is in that same sort of like Italian-American in the case of Phantasm. It's Don Coscarelli, whatever. But yeah, they're like Italian horror movie soundtrack mode, which gives it just like this really deep, dark, sonorous quality. But yeah, the song keeps going with those leads, and then they fade into the song after that, which is another song from the demos. On the demos, it was called Embrace the Death. On the album, it is called Pages in Blood. But like introing it with the lead guitar after that very lead-heavy song like prior, that's genius. These songs weren't even originally on the same demos. One was on the Mutilating Process EP, or I guess it's a 7-inch, and then this one was on like the kind of the full-length Embrace the Death demo. But it's a great idea to just stick them right next to each other like that. Also, the lyrics are completely different. They're about like the Necronomicon Ex Mortis from the Evil Dead series, sort of, but it's also kind of generally about Satanism, but not in like a positive light. There's nothing being displayed in a positive light on an Asphyx album. More just like the dangers of tampering with occult forces, given that you're like a weak human being in the grips of larger powers. Very nihilistic. Really cool break here. Watch this. I like how he like fills in the spaces between these different kind of hits with all sorts of weird little segues. Very cool stuff. Keeping that occult atmosphere of the demos, but adding in kind of the more gory and grounded atmospheres that Van Drunen has become rather famous for. So yeah, no, that's an excellent song. And we...
언니는 앞머리 있는 게 좋아, 내가?
Wait, really? We've been going for that fucking long? Jesus. Dude, we made it through the demos and the first album. I was planning on doing all of Asphyx in one episode. Looks like that's not going to happen. So this is definitely going to be a 2, if not possibly 3-parter, because I love this band so much and they've gone through so many changes over the years. But I feel like this probably gave you enough impetus to check out at least the first Asphyx album. And it only gets stranger from there, folks. So I'll see you next week.
最後の仕上げは宝石を取り出すことだ。女の体の中で最も美しいもの、それが